Hello, and welcome to tonight's Bruin Family Insights virtual discussion. This is brought to you by the UCLA Parents and Family Programs. And throughout the academic year, we engage around a variety of topics intended to help support you and your student as they go through the university process. Tonight's conversation is the second part, which focuses on professional and career development. This installment will focus on career readiness and particularly networking resources available through the Alumni Association for you and for your Bruin. So my name's Liz Moeller, and I am a member of the UCLA Parents Council. My son, Nathan Moeller, is a junior. He's a design media art major, and he's thoroughly enjoying his time at UCLA. And I'm also an empty nester because my younger son, Nicholas, went off to Boston University on a lacrosse scholarship. So my background's career development, and the Parent Council said, would you like to interview Angela Scales for tonight's conversation? So this evening, I'm excited to have Angela Scales because she's the Senior Director for Bruin Connections and Alumni Career Programs. Thank you so much for joining us, Angela. Why don't you start out by introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about you?
Thanks so much, Liz. I'm really excited to be a part of tonight's episode. I graduated from UCLA in 2003 with a degree in communication studies. And then in 2005, I started working at the Alumni Association. So this summer will mark 13 years working at the university. As you mentioned, my title is Senior Director of Bruin Connections and Alumni Career Programs. And what does that mean? Our team encompasses a lot of different programs. We build career programming and resources for Bruins at every stage of the career life cycle. We also do some innovative programming where we bring alumni into the classroom to guest lecture as well as lead our Bruin development academies. The team also encompasses the UCLA Spirit Squad, so the Yell Crew, dance team, cheer squad, and the mascots, as well as some of our largest campus-wide traditions. So programs like Dinners for 12 Strangers, Spring Sing, and the BSC Bonfire and Rally that come to you via our Student Alumni Association.
That's a lot. So we have a lot to cover tonight, but we have a full hour, and I will be able to share some stories that I have from my experience on campus. I've hosted a Dinner for 12 Strangers. I've also helped with the Career Boot Camp and with some of the interviewing. So I'm excited to get started, and we can start out by asking you to maybe share some of the resources that the Alumni Association provides that can really support professional development for the students.
Definitely. So there are a large variety of career resources that we provide. I think the most all-encompassing one is UCLA ONE, which is our online career community exclusively for Bruins. It has job and internship postings. It has peer-driven career advice. It's where you can find an alumni mentor. And there's also industry-specific networking groups so that if students are interested in a particular area, they can ask questions in that group. We also do a lot of in-person events. So one of the ones you mentioned with the mock interviews, we do an event called Interview with the Bruin, during which alumni conduct mock interviews with current students to help them sharpen their interview skills. And then a number of networking nights in a variety of industries. So entertainment, STEM, nonprofit. In fact, there are two this week. This Wednesday, we have a new one, digital media and marketing networking night. And on Thursday, one around entrepreneurship. So a variety of industries that students have expressed interest in which we bring alumni back to campus to answer questions and talk to them in small roundtable discussions. And then we also do virtual programming, a series called Bruin Career Insights that we do on YouTube Live.
Those are some great programs. And I know that networking really is the key to getting students back to work or getting them their first job. When I'm teaching a career workshop, I like to tell people a few of my Liz-isms, and I'll probably share a few of them today. One of them is that I tell my clients that networking is one letter away from not working. So the opportunity to go to an event like the Entrepreneurs Networking event and to meet with a fellow Bruin is fantastic. And I actually think it's even better when it's a small group because you get sort of one-on-one. So I really encourage the students to go ahead and take advantage of that. So tell me a little bit about UCLA ONE. How did that come about? And what's the most effective way for students to use that UCLA ONE platform?
Yeah, we launched UCLA ONE in October of 2015 with our mentor program. And then a year later, we started really actively marketing it to all alumni, students, parents, staff, and faculty in October of 2016. And there's a lot of ways that students can harness that resource. And we hope that parents will too, because it's a great space for all Bruins to connect. And so parents can be mentors too. They can network on the platform. It's a great space. For students, they can search and connect with alumni in a variety of ways. So they could search by company, by location, by major. Maybe they know that they're hoping to move to Chicago when they graduate. They could specifically look up Bruins who live in Chicago, ask them questions. They can message alumni on the site and ask questions. They could set up informational interviews, and they can also just get general career advice. And so they can look at internship postings on the jobs tab. We're growing that listing every day. And they can also post questions in those networking groups. So if they know they're interested in sustainability or maybe in nonprofits, they can go in there and just post a question that the group could answer because alumni have entered that particular group because that's their field. So there's a variety of ways, depending on how the student feels most comfortable, that they can use the site to connect with alumni or with fellow students.
That makes a lot of sense because the UCLA ONE platform actually sounds like that allows the students to text or email and reach out to somebody if they're a little shy and they're not quite ready to come to an event, or they might think their questions are a little silly or they're kind of stupid. And so UCLA ONE gives them a platform to email somebody who's a fellow Bruin, who's gone through the same experience of living in Westwood, and they might want to reach out and answer some questions. I also think it's unique that UCLA encourages parents to be on that server to be able to provide those resources, because I've registered on UCLA ONE. And I think it's a great tool because I went ahead and just easily uploaded my LinkedIn. And so people know that I'm a career coach and they know that I live locally in Playa del Rey. And so if they've got questions on an interview that's coming up, or they want to know about a specific resume technique or something that they have a question about, it's a great resource. And I also think it's really great because parents can give back to the university in that way. So if you're a parent that has a company that might be hiring, it's a great way to target a UCLA student because you've got a familiarity and a comfort level with that. So that's a great program, that UCLA ONE. Thank you. Tell us a little bit more about the Bruin Career Insights. What's the focus of that program and what can students gain from the Bruin Insights?
So the focus of that program is really making sure that our career programming is not Westwood centric. We want to make sure that the career resources are accessible from anywhere. And so each month we interview an alumnus in a different industry or who has expertise in a particular career development topic. And so what's really fun is students and alumni and parents can tune in. They can submit questions in the live chat, and then we address as many of them as possible. And what's great is that immediately after the episode, just like tonight's episode, it's available on the YouTube channel forever. So if a student has class during the live broadcast, they can watch when they get back from class or anytime. And then they can also submit questions in advance. So we have all the Bruin community can submit an RSVP. It's optional, but it has a slot for them to put a question for the speaker, so that way, if there's something they want answered, it helps us to guide our script and our conversation so that we know what students and alumni and parents are interested in hearing about. And as you said, maybe if a student is more shy or introverted, then watching the online programming and asking questions might be a great way for them to get more comfortable in their early years at UCLA.
That sounds great. And that's actually what we're doing tonight. So if anybody has any questions, they can actually type their questions in. And so it doesn't matter if you're here in Los Angeles or if you're somewhere far away, you have an opportunity to log on and be involved in that conversation. That's great. And I think a lot of what we're talking about today is sort of universal with all the parents that are out there. So if you have a son or daughter that's not at UCLA, you can still sort of benefit from knowing that maybe your university offers these things and you don't have to be on campus, but these are some of the special things that UCLA has. So what advice would you give a current Bruin regarding how to decide which resources might be most useful if they're currently in school? What suggestions do you have?
I would recommend that they try out different types of events. So they might find that a networking night could be a little bit intimidating as a freshman. And so I would tell them to start with UCLA ONE, create a profile, reach out to alumni and ask some questions, because it can be a great way for them to build their confidence and get more comfortable asking career questions. And then maybe, ask one to do an informational interview. Then, maybe they take a look at the quarterly digest we send out every quarter. It's called Student Connect, and it has all of the events coming up that quarter from the Alumni Association. And it has short descriptions of each event. So making sure to look, is an industry that I'm interested in having a networking night this quarter. And it also has links to broader campus programming. So for example, Career Week, which is put on by the Career Center. And then also to follow us on social media. On the UCLA Alumni channel, there's an SAA channel, as well as a partnership UCLA Alumni Career Programs channel, because that can be a great way to just kind of passively keep an eye on what's coming up so that they'll see events and can sign up, even if it's just a week before. We often do the marketing for student events only 1 to 2 weeks prior to the event because we know they're busy. And so just making sure they stay on top of that by following us on social media.
That makes a lot of sense, because we don't want these students to wait until they're seniors. We want them to be slowly peppering in the opportunity to explore different majors. And I think that's one of the benefits of UCLA being on the quarter system, is every 10 weeks, they can wrap up a course. And if they say, gosh, I really like that class, I wonder what the careers are around that class, they can log in and find out when there's going to be a program specifically for that major or for that department. So as they're going through their college lifestyle of what do I like, what do I enjoy, I thought I was going to do pre-med, and then I had organic chemistry, and now I'm not sure. So as students are kind of growing and changing their minds and trying to figure it all out, parents should also just be encouraging them to go to these career events, even if it is freshman year, sophomore year, etc. That's a great suggestion. Okay, so we have a couple questions about students that are specifically liberal arts majors, specifically trying to figure out what are the options. Should they go to grad school? Should they not go to grad school? Any suggestions on that?
I think that's a great place where something like UCLA ONE can be helpful, because they can ask questions of people in some of those fields and ask them about their own experience, because there's a lot of options that, don't involve grad school, whether it's, entertainment or nonprofits, a lot of different spaces in which, there's not necessarily that linear path of grad school right after they finish their undergrad. And so I think a really great thing to do can be attending an event in a specific industry that maybe they're thinking about, because they can ask those questions, and they might find that 50% of the alumni went to grad school in that field and 50% didn't. And they would want to be able to hear those stories of, well, how did you get to this path? And maybe that wasn't even where they intended to go when they graduated, but through a couple different changes, they've ended up in that industry that the student is interested in. And so I think hearing how unique each person's path is can be helpful to the students. Otherwise, sometimes they think, well, in order to do X, Y, Z, I must go to grad school. And what we know is that career paths are rarely linear. And so, it really is smart to check out how different people approached it. Or, for example, what value alumni might place on taking a gap year, and exploring something before going to grad school.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of gap years. I think students are so overwhelmed with what they're doing while they're at the university that taking a quarter off or taking a little bit of time off, graduate schools like MBA programs actually require it. They won't really let you slide right in. But then there's other graduate programs that are recommended to go into rather quickly. But I always caution my students, be careful what you go for you will surely get it. And then I steal from Stephen Covey, and I talk about begin with the end in mind. If you get that PhD, what types of jobs will there be on the other side? So I think that's a great idea to talk to. And when you're on a college campus, take advantage of talking to grad students and your TAs and anybody that's helping out the professors, and sort of ask them, what's life like in that role with those responsibilities? That's great. Okay, we're segueing over to internships. Any suggestions on internships? And what are some opportunities for the undergraduates? And when should they start looking for those internships?
They can start looking anytime, because there are a variety of resources where they can find them. They are on UCLA ONE. They're on the Career Centers platform, which is moving to Handshake. And then, they can also talk to their advisor in their department, because different majors will have a class that is attached to an internship. And so it may be smart to check in with that advisor and say, hey, at what point in my, career here at UCLA should I be looking at those internships? And is the class required? Because different majors have different setups, and different internships are the same. Some will require class credit and some won't. So kind of investigating those different opportunities. But I think it's very smart to, go on to those platforms such as UCLA ONE and see what's out there. And also to ask people about internships at their company, even if they don't have one posted, but they're conversing with an alumnus, for example, on the site, to say, hey, are there internships at your company? Because sometimes it can be helpful to find out that there are, but the timeline is such that they only hire in winter, for example. And so I think it's really important to ask those questions and find out, so that you're not missing those deadlines and finding out that you have to wait a year for a particular area.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of confusion that parents have about internships, and I like to broaden it, and it's the terminology. Is it an internship? Is it a part-time job? Is it a volunteer job? Is it work experience? Is it just an informational interview that kind of goes into helping them out with something? And so I like to kind of coach clients and students that are trying to figure out their internship to really focus on where can they get the most experience and what can they sample and test the waters with. And that's the beauty of an internship, because if you're really committed to an internship, you work there all summer, maybe you can continue in the fall, or maybe you can go back the following year. So absolutely, networking to find those great secret internships is a starting point, because when you graduate, you're going to want to have something on your resume in addition to the academic background and experience. So I'm a huge fan of the internships. That's great. Any particular guidance for juniors? I know junior year to senior year, that junior year internship is kind of a pivotal one. Any other tips or thoughts on that?
I think if they are a junior and they're thinking about that because they haven't done an internship yet, then they should, stop into the Career Center, talk to one of the career counselors about it, stop into our office and talk to us about the opportunities that are on UCLA ONE, or companies that we may have heard about that haven't posted yet, but we know are always looking for interns, as well as just connections to alumni who may have expressed to us that they're always looking for them, and that even if it's not posted, we might be able to connect them with an alumnus, who we know hires 20 to 30 interns, every spring or something like that. So I think at that point, it's just being more proactive and, heading into the Career Center, making sure that they're signed up, as well as going to some of the career fairs. There's a career fair every few weeks in different types of industry spaces. And so making sure that they're going to those and really finding out what is the landscape for internships in their particular area. And in addition to what you were saying earlier, Liz, I think that students also don't realize that sometimes internships are what help you discover what you don't want to do. And that's what happened to me. So I think they can be just as valuable at getting in, working in a space that you thought would be really interesting, and then saying, you know what, this isn't for me. And that could be just as valuable as finding your true career path, because you're getting a chance to do that particular or work in that particular area hands-on and learn that maybe it's not the fit for you.
Right. As a matter of fact, I tell clients this all the time, that any job is going to give you experience, because it's going to give you soft skills. It's going to give you an opportunity to learn the work world, dressing up every day, time management, dealing with different people and different personalities. So even if your job as a college student, you might say to yourself, I'm not really qualified to do anything. I'm just a freshman in college, or I'm a sophomore at college. But think about an opportunity to work at a summer camp, or to work retail, or to work at a restaurant, because you're going to learn how to deal with different personalities. So it may not be industry specific, but it's work experience. And I think a lot of times parents say, oh, just focus on academics. But if you have the opportunity and you've got the time over the summer to do something, any job is going to be a good job, whether it's on track for your major, or whether it's just work experience. It's going to be beneficial for you. Julie S. actually asked a question. She actually asked, what specific responses are we getting for how career ready our students are? So that's a big question that we have. A lot of employers are saying, yeah, you have a 4-year degree, but are you really career ready? Do you have any feedback from employers? Are they saying that students are career ready, or what should they do to get career ready?
Yeah, that's actually been the origin of some of our best programs, has been feedback from alumni, whether in a particular industry, of sharing that, wow, UCLA students are really smart, but they're maybe lacking that professional polish. And so some of our programs have involved bringing alumni in to kind of bridge that gap between the classroom and career, because I think what they find is that students who have mentors and who've done those mock interviews and things like that are more prepared, because what we see the alumni resource as really helping you to work through those maybe gaps in your career readiness, so that when you go to the interview and it's real, you're ready. And so I think that that's an area where the alumni feedback and just the alumni engagement in our programs is huge, because they're willing to come and essentially let students practice whatever those career skills are for a particular event, or to help them with those questions that students aren't quite sure, can I ask this in an interview? And so sitting down at a networking night or with a mentor and asking all those questions is such a great resource, so that they can get, they can ask someone where, there's no fear. This is your mentor, and that's what they're there for. And so I think that those programs really help, and the students who take advantage of those resources are much more career ready than the students who are maybe a little too afraid to come to an event or get a mentor, because they don't know what they don't know.
Right, right. And it's tough as a parent. I know with my two boys, I wanted to career coach them. I wanted to tell them what to do, but they didn't want to listen to mom. They don't even want to listen to dad. So helping to introduce them to somebody that might be a potential mentor who's already raised their hand and said, I'm interested, I'm willing, I'm able, I'd like to help. Actually telling your students to reach out. They want to talk to you. In fact, Juliet said, how can I volunteer to be in a career program? I'd like to speak at a class, or I'd like to judge a case study competition. What are some of the best ways for parents to get involved and to give back?
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways. They can, first of all, they can just email us. Our email is careerprograms@alumni.ucla.edu. They can also reach out on UCLA ONE. I know that our speaker for this coming Thursday's Bruin Career Insights actually reached out to us on UCLA ONE, said, I want to give back, I want to be involved, this is my career expertise, and she is our speaker. And so that's another great way. Just send us a message telling us a little bit about your background and how you'd like to be involved. And then also just checking out our website, because whether it's on the main UCLA page or on the events listed on Facebook, they can see things that are coming up. And so they can just shoot us an email and say, hey, I saw this event coming up in June. I would love to volunteer. And then we will get them signed up. So I think email is the best way, but UCLA ONE is great too, because it's wonderful to take that first step of signing up and then sending us information, because then the parent becomes a resource to all students and fellow alumni who they can connect with, or they might ask questions, because the parents are some of the greatest career resources. They are at these companies that students, want to get jobs at. And so the more parents we can get on the site, the stronger that network will be.
Yeah, and that's actually why I put my toe in the water as a volunteer. And joining the Parents Council was a really fun thing to do, because UCLA actually has a Parents Council, and we actually are here to support each other. And so parents reaching out to parents and parents reaching out to offer services is a great way to do it. And I've been fortunate that the Career Center asked me to help out with the Bruin boot camp. And then the Career Center asked me to help out on a panel. So I know that there's opportunities. The other thing that I think is unique is that as a parent and an alumni, you can go to any of these events, that they're all Bruin welcome. So I may not have graduated from UCLA. However, I'm considered part of the Bruin family. And so that networking opportunity has helped in my professional life. So it's not just open to a student, it's open to anybody. And it's a two-way street. So I may be providing advice for somebody, and then, as happened to me last year, I needed help with business cards, and I reached out to a student, and she was a graphic design major, and I said, can you make me some business cards? And she said, sure. So you just never know. If you switch it up a little bit. Sometimes I coach my students, especially, don't be so desperate to get a job. Don't walk into a room and say, hey, I'm looking for a job and I really need a summer job, and will you hire me? But to shift it and kind of soften it a little bit and think about who you want to help. And where are the groups or the clubs or the organizations or the companies where you say, I'd really like to help. Maybe you identify a company that needs a better website or needs some social media presence, and you're young and you like to do that. Offer to help, because I think that that's a slight shift, and then you're more likely to get a warm response than if you ask them for a job. So that's just one of my thoughts. Okay, so we have another question coming in asking, how has technology impacted the job strategy search? Any thoughts on technology and how it's shifted things?
Yeah, I think that it's affected in a lot of different ways, because jobs are posted in so many different places. And I think that that's actually an area where we were most excited about having our own platform, because LinkedIn is fantastic and you can connect with alumni on there, ask them questions, because maybe you're applying for a job at their company and you want to ask them questions about the climate and how to best prepare. Whereas by having our own platform, we're kind of pulling that Bruin community into one space and having, as you mentioned, people raise their hand and say, I want to be more engaged with UCLA. I want to help other Bruins. And so the likelihood that a Bruin's going to respond when they're in this exclusive Bruin community is even higher. And so it's a great way for students to maybe do that research that everyone tells you before an interview. Make sure you research the company. So I think the fact that there's the technological capacity to find alumni at any company that you're interested in, and then connect with them either in advance of applying, or maybe you have an interview in a week and you reach out to someone and say, hey, I have an interview, could I prep with you a bit? Could you give me some tips? And so I think that ability to actually search by people at that company or people in that industry has really changed the game, because it takes the network that you have at UCLA and it just magnifies it, because now you could connect with alumni, all over the globe who might have that experience, but they might, live in Beijing, but they worked at that company after college. And so it doesn't limit where that network could be that could help you in that process.
That's a great suggestion. And I think it's interesting to think about UCLA ONE as making the World Wide Web a little smaller, because some students I talk to and I say, you may not be quite ready to put a LinkedIn profile up because you may still be undecided or unsure of the direction you want to go. But UCLA ONE allows you to kind of test the waters. You can create a profile, which is kind of like creating a resume. You can put the classes you've taken, what you've enjoyed, your skills, your experience, and upload it, and then use it to sort of test the waters. And then polish it and, go ahead and circle back. There's so much that technology has changed. It's almost made resumes obsolete. But I like to tell students, you're still going to need to customize your particular resume to each specific job as you're out there looking for work. You can't just rely on LinkedIn to convey all of the information about who you are as a person. You really need to kind of gather your thoughts. And nowadays, my son has his own website, and he's got his whole portfolio is on there. And actually, I told him the other day, it's not everything you've done, it's just what you want to highlight, and it's just what you want people to see and what you want to share with them. So the technology of having your own website, having samples of your work, having a portfolio, technology has really ramped it up, and yet you still have to eventually go face to face and meet somebody. So it's good to have that as a tool. Okay, so we've covered a couple questions coming in from our virtual audience out there. And if we can dig in a little bit further to any common mistakes you see that students are making, whether they're preparing or not preparing, what kind of mistakes are typical and common?
Well, you alluded to this a little bit earlier, but I think one of the most common mistakes is someone who waits until their senior year to start thinking about career development. And so, students should start checking out these programs as a freshman. It might feel a little scary, but I think it's all about taking baby steps. So, for example, I would say as a freshman, join UCLA ONE, message a few people, get a sense of maybe what it's like to work in that industry. Then as a sophomore, start attending events, go to interview with the Bruin, request an alumni mentor, go to a networking night. Because the key in my mind is to get comfortable with what you're going to do at one of those networking nights before you, quote, need a job and you're a senior and then you're graduating in a month and you're going to one of those events for the first time. So the idea is that by the time you're attending and you're a senior, you feel confident and you know how to navigate those events because you've been practicing and going before it felt like an urgent need. And then also, I think if you wait until your senior year to start exploring those programs, there's just not time to take advantage of it all. So you need to start early. And I think if you space it out over the course of the 4 years, you'll amass an incredible amount of career knowledge, but also a really broad network, because you'll have a list of the people that you met at these different networking nights and events over 4 years, and you can tap into it by following up with those people, which I know is, as a career coach, is probably something you tell people. If you met with that person, you write it in your Google Doc, and then you think about how often you follow up and you say, I just wanted to check in with you. We met at interview with the Bruin. You send a thank you right after, and then maybe a couple months later you reach out and say, hey, I'm starting to apply for internships, wondered if I could ask you a few questions, or whatever it might be, but you'll have amassed 4 years worth of those contacts. And I think that's key, versus if you just freak out and start doing that senior year, then I think that you put yourself in a real panic situation.
Right. And we don't want anybody panicking. We don't want the parents panicking. We don't want the kids panicking. I think that's a huge part of what I do as a career coach is I try to calm people down. I try to listen. And a little bit of my tips for parents would be really listen to your kids. You ask them what they're interested in. Ask them what they like to do. Ask them what they've learned at school. Ask them how they want to spend their time this summer. For our students, we've got another 8 weeks to go, but other universities finish up earlier. So sometimes UCLA students feel like they're late to the game because the summer's already started. But it's really an opportunity to get them thinking about what do they like, what are they interested in, and what do they have a passion for. I can share a personal story that I had. I was trying to coach my freshman in college to get a job at a coffee shop over the summer because I ran into one of his friends. And I said, oh, you're working at the coffee shop. That means they're hiring students. Maybe my son will get a job at the coffee shop. And I went home and I dragged him out of bed and I said, go to the coffee shop. And he went and he had about a 10-minute interview and he came out so discouraged. And he said, you know, she wanted to know if I liked coffee and if I liked washing dishes and if I knew what a cappuccino and a latte was. He goes, Mom, I don't want to serve coffee. I don't want to make coffee. That's not what I want to do. And he'd been gone for a full year. So I had to kind of take a step back and go, well, what do you want to do? And he said, I want to make movies. I want to do videos. I want to be in production. And so I started to think, well, who do we know that knows our son that could give him a good conversation about it? And certainly parents have the ability to reach out to this network and to sort of plant the seeds of, hey, look, I found on UCLA ONE that there's this person, and this person. And what was fun was that what happened was we called our friends and said, hey, would you talk to our freshman in college? He's thinking about design, media arts. He's thinking about film and television. Maybe you could use some help in your office. And I put them together and they networked. And the next thing I know, he said, sure, he can come in the office and be a PA, a production assistant. And sure enough, after his first 2 days on the job, I said, well, what are you doing? He said, Mom, you'll never believe it. I'm making coffee. I'm cleaning the break room. I now know what it is to order a latte and a cappuccino because I have to run out and get the coffee. So you never know what parents seem to know best what skills they need to have, but it can take a little while for the kids to circle back. But that was a great experience for him, and he certainly learned a lot, and he gave back a lot, and it was an unpaid internship, and then he was doing such a good job that they said, all right, you can come on set, and he learned so much just by being on set. So that's a great lead-in. Okay, we've talked a lot about students. What else can we do to support the career shifts or perhaps second acts? What career support would benefit the parents that are going through some of these challenges? Any other thoughts on that?
Well, we actually have a new set of programs that started about a year ago. They're called the Second Act, and they're really focused on providing some of those resources and interesting topics for alumni who might be thinking about a second act, whether it's a career pivot or maybe they're retiring and they're trying to figure out, what are those passions they should pursue. And so there have been 3 or 4 of those events. They happen every quarter, and it's a great space if parents want to come and connect with other Bruins who might be in that same headspace. They can also get involved in being a mentor themselves or reaching out to other alumni that maybe are in the field that they want to make a pivot to, because I think that's the way that the network in general can be the most helpful for parents is they can, reach out to someone in that industry that they want to move to and say, hey, here's what I'm looking to do. Here's my resume. How could I explain that these are transferable skills in terms of the industry that I want to move into? And so I think alumni can be a great resource in that space, as well as just connecting with alumni in their area. As you mentioned, the Dinners for 12 Strangers, those happen all over. So parents can go to them and find other alumni and parents that live in their city, especially if they don't live in Southern California. It could be a great way to make new career and professional contacts for themselves, because at those dinners, they're going to be people who live in the same area.
Yeah, the Dinner with 12 Strangers was a lot of fun. We had probably 5 different generations present. We had recent graduates, and we had retirees, and we had everything in between. And because it was Dinner with 12 Strangers, nobody knew anybody. They just RSVP'd on time, and they showed up, and my student was there, and my husband was there, and he recognized one person out of the group, but that was somebody he knew from the neighborhood. So it is nice to have it kind of local and to rally the groups to get together with that Dinner for 12 Strangers. And you're right, that's all for alumni and people that are possibly in career transition and just want to get out of the house and have a nice dinner and meet a fellow Bruin and do the 8 clap. So I definitely recommend those Dinner for 12 Strangers. So a question here about the maintaining of the memberships and the different kinds of memberships. Can you tell us a little bit about how the Alumni Association works with the different levels and how do you maintain that membership?
Yeah, so I think that membership is critical because it's what powers all the programs that we're talking about today. So when alumni become a blue or a gold member, when they upgrade their membership, they're ensuring that these career programs are going to be available for students, alumni, and parents moving forward. It's, membership is what funds all of the networking nights. It's what funds UCLA ONE and all of the events that we've talked about. And so it's really critical. It makes all those programs possible.
So it's really a matter of being active, being involved, offering to give back, checking the email, checking the websites. There's so many things going on at UCLA. It can be a little overwhelming, but I do think that once you start going to some of the networking events, you're going to become more comfortable. Nobody really likes to network. I mean, I like to network because I've got that type A personality and I love the opportunity to meet new people. But I can speak from experience that a lot of the students I work with, they're shy and it's sort of a cultural thing. And maybe they're a first generation student and they're not used to talking about themselves or promoting themselves. And so I tell them, you have to practice, practice, practice. And if you can practice on a college campus where everybody else is just as nervous, it's a really good starting point. And even parents inviting your student to go with your student or show up on campus and as embarrassing as that might be, it's all about sort of leading by example or teaching by example or being a role model or, asking questions for yourself because you're curious and getting answers and then sharing those answers. Because I think that parents really do have a lot more influence on their kids than we really think. When we don't think they're listening, they are. And so every once in a while, I'll hear my son say something back to me about why he joined a club. And I'll say, are you really excited about that club? And he says, yeah, it's going to be a lot of work, but it's really all about the network. It's all about the connections. So whether it's Greek life, whether it's playing a sport, those are your groups. Those are your communities. And there's probably been a UCLA alumni who's gone before you. So connecting with those small, comfortable groups is another way to get involved and to give back. We can even talk a little bit about the sporting events. What sort of alumni programs are around sporting events? Do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, the networks all around the globe often have watch parties for the games. And so you'll get emails about that, which is actually a critical piece too, is the communication, making sure that UCLA has the correct address for where you live, because that's how you get the email that here's where the watch party is in Pittsburgh, for example. But if UCLA thinks that you live in San Francisco, then you're going to get the wrong email. So making sure that you keep UCLA up to date with, what city you live in. And then you can go to watch parties with people in that network, or you can, just connect with them at an event like a dinner for 12 strangers. And then what often comes of that is then there's kind of maybe an informal email group that says, hey, everybody from our D12, let's go, watch the basketball game together. And so it can kind of grow more organically from there. But there's a lot of events that happen around that space, or they may go to an event together. I know that, for example, the Bruins in Sacramento have gone to some Kings games when a team with a lot of UCLA Bruins was playing the Kings, and they got to actually meet the UCLA players after the game. So always looking out for those unique opportunities to have events where there's Bruins in town, and you wouldn't think of it because you don't live in LA, but there's a lot of those opportunities to either connect with fellow Bruins and or also get to meet some of our, great athletes when they're in town.
Yeah, I think the sporting events are a great way to network because it's not like you're purposely going there to get a job. You're going there because you both enjoy sports. You go there because you want to cheer on the team. And inevitably, somebody's going to ask you that $1 million question, which is, so tell me about yourself. And so I always want to make sure my students have a 30-second infomercial ready to go when somebody says, so tell me about yourself. It's not just I'm a UCLA student and this is my major and this is what I'm doing. Start to talk to your student about where they want to go so that they can answer with, I'm really interested in going into political science, or I'm exploring the field of medicine. And if you can name drop and say the name of a company you really want to work at, it's not unusual for somebody to say, I might not know anything about that, but you should talk to this person over here. So those sporting events are networking, and yet they're fun. And so I think people let their guard down, and people love to give advice. They love to talk about their careers. So it's also a good networking tip to go to those sporting events and just start talking to people, ask around. Maybe you want to get a job in Century City or in downtown LA. go to those networking events in the location where you're hoping to meet somebody. And you never know, you might just meet somebody who happens to work at the place you're interested in working. So I love those sporting events. I think that's a great one. Okay, we have another question that's come in from somebody who says, what do you advise for somebody who accepts a job and then quickly realizes it's not a good fit?
Ooh, that's a good one, Liz. As the career coach, that might be something you need to answer. I mean, my initial reaction is to attempt to stay for a year in terms of thinking about your resume and the fact that if you do jump, that is something that you're going to make sure that you're comfortable addressing in future interviews, because oftentimes the employer may ask you, you stayed at this job for 3 months, what happened? And so knowing that if you could stay for a year, that's ideal. And if not, then just being ready for how are you going to tell your narrative in terms of on your resume in the future. And as long as you're comfortable with that, I think it's okay to leave, but it's just making sure that you're aware of kind of the consequences that may come with that. But I would love, as a career coach, to hear what you think about that one, Liz.
It's a great question. It's a great question. And I like the fact that somebody threw that in there, so it kind of catches us off guard and we have to be sort of improvisational. So quitting a job right after you take it, obviously that's a challenge. You've made a commitment, they've hired you. But it does remind me of the fact that people will actually spend more time researching the purchase of a new car than they will their next job. So I think I've given you one of my Lizisms, which is be careful what you go for you will surely get it. So if you're thinking of interviewing and taking a job at a company, go hang out at that company, meet somebody that works there, talk to somebody that works there, look on Glassdoor, look for feedback, do your homework. You're a student, you've learned how to research. Take the time to research these companies. The other interesting statistic is that this generation that are finishing college now, they're going to be changing jobs and switching careers so quickly that a 2-month job, 3-month job may not look as bad as it would for somebody older who takes a job and then burns a bridge. So one of the interesting statistics I can say is that it's easier to get a job if you have a job. So if you can hang on to that job while you're looking for another job, you're going to be better off. And certainly you don't want to leave them hanging. There's something to be said about the courtesy rule of a 2-week notice. And that's something I've had to teach a lot of college students because they just don't think about that. They just say to themselves, well, I'll just go in on Friday and it'll be my last day. And I say, no, the common courtesy is you've got to give 2 weeks notice. Don't just fade away from a position. If you're not doing well at it, talk to the boss, talk to the manager, ask them, I'm struggling with this, or I know I've made a few mistakes. What can I do to make it better? Maybe this isn't a good fit for me. I always tell people the #1 reason you'll get hired is also the #1 reason you'll get fired. And the #1 thing that employers are looking for is the #1 thing that the job seeker should be looking for. And it's all about the fit. And I have a mirror behind me. If it was a chalkboard, I would write FIT. It's all about the fit. But if you do take a job and it's not the right fit, try to work it out. Try to look on the bright side. Try to look at what you're going to learn from that opportunity, who you're going to meet in that opportunity, and then manage those expectations. And if you need to give notice, absolutely give notice and move on. But that's a tough call. That's a great question. I hope we get some more good questions because these are great questions coming in from our audience. We have a couple more on our list, so we can take a look. Well, let's see. So what do you think is most unique about the UCLA Alumni Network, or the most beneficial to the students and the families? I guess that's kind of 2 questions in one.
Yeah, no, I think that what's unique about it is, one, that it's global. And so I think that, UCLA has over 500,000 living alumni. And so part of what's unique is that if you're interested in a really niche industry, that it doesn't matter where they live. As a student, you could connect with that alumnus. And so I think that's a great piece of not being limited to alumni who live locally, because if you're interested in a very particular part of medicine or a particular area of philosophy, that by using something like UCLA ONE, you could track down alumni who work in that space. And by the nature of them being on UCLA ONE, it already shows they want to be more engaged. And so the ability to reach out to them is fantastic. And I think in general, one of the things that I have found in speaking to alumni, across the career space, is that in reality, the biggest career resource that we have as Bruins is the network. And so our ability, what we're really looking to do is just be the conduit to that network as the Alumni Association, because we want alumni to take advantage of the fact that that is the strongest thing we have as Bruins. It's this network of one another, and the fact that Bruins want to hire Bruins. They want to mentor one another. They want to, I talk to alumni all the time that say, I have a couple of Trojan interns right now. I really need more Bruin interns. And it's great because they want to have more Bruins at their company. And so I think it's realizing that alumni and students just need to tap into that network. With something like UCLA, we're putting it in front of you, and all you have to do is sign up and take advantage of it, because it really is the best and most, it's the best resource that we have as Bruins.
It really is golden. I mean, it's blue and gold. It's all about the blue and gold and the connectivity, and giving an employer the option of hiring somebody who's from their alma mater, who they know and trust, versus an outsider. It's all about the network. Statistically, you've got a 75 to 95% better chance of getting a job through someone you know. And I like to coach clients and walk them through the stages of career development. And the number one stage is people need to get to know you, and you need to get to know them. But they're not going to hire you just because they know you. They can get to know you off LinkedIn and a resume. They have to decide if they like you. And the only way they're going to do that is to interview you, or at least have a conversation with you. And that might not even be enough. That it's that third element of trust. So they get to know you, they get to like you, and do they trust you? And if they trust UCLA, they trust that you've gotten a great academic background, they're more likely to trust you and move forward with it. I spend a lot of time I do a lot of free workshops. In fact, I do library workshops. So if somebody connects with me on UCLA ONE and wants to come into one of my library workshops, I go through the whole process of what are the phases of job search, and does it start with a resume? And the answer is no. This is another Lizism. Resumes don't get jobs, people do. So I spend most of my time coaching my clients on networking. And that's why I'm a huge fan of the UCLA Alumni Association, because it really is all about networking. And that's the number one most effective way to get a job, is networking. As I said, one letter away from not working. So we have another question that came in that says, it seems like, and this is a question from, I can't see who this is from, but it says, the millennial generation believes that promotions and raises come quickly. How can I coach a young person that sometimes those things need to be the supervisor's idea? Ooh, thoughts on that?
That's a good question. My first reaction to that is coaching them on the idea that if their work speaks for itself and they are really invested in proving themselves, then their reputation with their supervisor will be, wow, this person is really dedicated and wants to grow here, versus if something is coming up about their salary or promotion too soon, then immediately that becomes their reputation. And so I think it's letting your professional strengths and your work ethic and that become your reputation, because I think that your supervisor will recognize that, and those promotions will come. So I think part of it is having trust and faith that your work ethic will speak for itself and that those things will come, because I think sometimes when someone asks, then that can kind of set you apart in a not so positive way, because then the supervisor, when they first think of your name, instead of thinking, gosh, that person is, really invested and really doing amazing things for our company, the first thought that might pop in is, wow, they're all about the money or the salary. And so I think it's just knowing how to wait for those opportunities, and knowing that the patience to wait for it is probably going to result in more salary down the road.
Yeah. And I would say be prepared. Absolutely advocate for yourself, but be prepared by knowing what you've already accomplished, and certainly start to track those accomplishments. Set goals for yourself personally, set goals for yourself professionally. I coach students and anybody that's got a job to think about a 360. Think about not just your direct supervisor, but your colleagues, your coworkers, the people that report to you. You want everybody on your side. You want everybody acknowledging what a great employee you are, so that when the time does come, you can sort of test the waters with associates or colleagues or coworkers. Are you ready to take that next step? And will they support you? And will they encourage you? So it's more than just the money. I always cringe when somebody says, well, I took this job for the money, because I say, well, in the long term, you want more than the money to speak on the reason you have that job. So definitely it's a challenge, especially with the millennial generation. I read a statistic the other day that the average starting salary for a new college graduate is $50,000. Now, whether that seems high in some parts of the country or low, it's about testing the waters and seeing, you know, what is a new recent college graduate likely to expect, and what can they think they're going to get out of college, and starting to, as parents, starting to talk to your kids about how much is rent, how much is food, how much is car insurance, and how are you going to, you know, sustain yourself. And how are you going to sort of do that soft launch so that maybe you let them stay over the summer, but how's that? What does that look like? And the millennials, that they're actually used to working multiple jobs. That may be something that's a little foreign to my generation. The moonlighting was sort of frowned on, but nowadays these kids can have an online ability to make money, or they can work Postmates, or they can drive Uber, or they can do other things. And why not? They're young, they have the energy. Go for it. Do as many things as you can. Excellent. Okay, we have a question about work-life balance. Do you have any advice for students? You're on the college campus. Any student advice for work-life balance?
You know, I heard someone answer this question on a panel at Bruin Day on Saturday, and I thought that they did a good job of it, because in what you said about the network being the most important thing, I think it's recognizing that while you might feel like your grades and that class are the most important thing, I think it's finding a balance between doing your coursework, but also making connections at UCLA, because someday that is going to be your network. And so if you're always studying and you're not connecting with people, then I think you're going to be missing out on one of the things that you should be taking with you. In addition to that diploma, hopefully you're taking with you a great network, and that it would also include professors, so that if you wanted to go to grad school, you would have someone who could write a letter of recommendation. Same with someone, if you were in a club, you can ask your advisor to write recommendations. So all those pieces that if you don't get involved or you don't connect with other students across campus, that I think you'll miss out on when you leave. So I think the balance comes with recognizing that it's important to study hard, but that there's a place for that studying, and making sure that it's not 100%, you know, of every week, but rather leaving a percentage to connect with one another, and also learning about what they're interested in and what they're pursuing, because oftentimes that helps you to figure out what your path should be, because you're learning about different people's experiences, different areas and careers that they're interested in. And sometimes they might say, oh, hey, I'm going to this networking night tonight, you know, do you want to come with me? And we've heard in some surveys that students say, just having it say, bring a friend, that some people actually shared that they would come if they knew they could bring a friend, versus if they couldn't, then they were too intimidated. And so just recognizing that, you know, going to those events with friends, and maybe that's what makes them a little less nervous, but it gets them there, that's huge, because making those connections and that network is what's going to help get them a job when they graduate. As you mentioned, the resume or the diploma is not going to get you a job. It's those connections and that network.
Absolutely. And so that work-life balance can actually benefit you, because somewhere on the resume, you can put hobbies, interests, activities, and those friendships that you make through those clubs and those associations are going to launch you. I have a story from an entrepreneur client that I had. He was in college. He joined the entrepreneur club. And sure enough, the entrepreneurs that he really admired and looked up to, they graduated, they left, they went out, they started companies. He was still on campus working with other entrepreneur clubs. And when he graduated, he reached out to the friends from those clubs, and he landed his first job. So I always am challenging students from freshman year, start with 1 or 2 clubs. By sophomore year, add 2 or 3 more. And by junior year, be a leader in the club. Try to really position yourself to take a leadership role, and then give back to the freshmen and sophomores, because now you're an upperclassman. And when you start to realize that your time on the UCLA campus is coming short, set some goals for senior year that involve something more than just the academic rigor, because we know the academic rigor is there, but you're also learning how to live with other people in a small apartment, and you're learning how to manage a social life, and you're learning how to take into consideration that eating the right foods and exercising is really important. So if you like to go for a run, or you like to play a sport, get involved, because that's something you can continue beyond the college experience into adulthood. So if you've joined a club and you've joined a sport and you want to keep that going, all of those business networks. I mean, a lot of business deals are made on a golf course, and a lot of people would rather hire a teammate. So you never know where those bonding things can come from. And I feel for the students that are struggling academically and feel like they don't have time. And I ask them, what are you going to remember 10 years from now? Are you going to remember the grade you got on that paper, or how much fun you had over the weekend when you were hanging out with your friends? So parents, don't come down too hard on your kids to get that 4.0 in college. Let them fail. Let them fail while they're in college so that they're not failing on the job. It would be better for them to have a rough experience while they're in college where you can say, you know what, that's okay. Maybe that academic course was too hard for you. At least you found out now. Or if you didn't like it and that's why you didn't get a good grade in it. Because the grades are going to matter in a small world for a small handful of students. But the majority are going to find that it's relationships and the networking that's going to carry them through. We might want to ask you for any other personal stories you have, Angela. Any best advice you ever received, or your best Bruin experience that led to your success and where you are now?
Yeah, I think that my Bruin experience really prepared me in a lot of ways, because UCLA is a big school. And so I think that learning to navigate this campus, it's challenging at first, but it also really lays the foundation for navigating the real world. As my friends often say, no one holds your hand at UCLA. You have to figure it out. And I think there's a plethora of resources at your disposal. You just have to reach out and take advantage of them. And that's true of the professional world as well. You have a network of UCLA alumni and connections that you've built during your time on campus. And you just have to leverage that network when you graduate, because your classmates and your peers, as you mentioned, they're valuable contacts. So learning how to find your way at UCLA is a great testing ground for finding your path in the job market. And then also, I think going to UCLA really pushed me to grow, because when you get to UCLA, everyone's the cream of the crop from their high school. And so that pushes you in all of your classes. It pushes you in your clubs and even on your IM sports teams, because you have this mentality that everyone is pushing to be their best and that you can't be complacent, because that theme and that theme of excellence at UCLA is contagious. And so you're always working towards that next goal. And to this day, my closest friends are the people that I met at UCLA or that I've met here at Alumni Affairs. And so I feel like it's served me really well. On the note you asked about the best career advice, I heard a quote at a career event that we did 5 years ago, and it's stuck with me ever since. A panelist said, "Keep your boss's boss off your boss's back." And it took me a while to figure that out over the years, but over time, I knew what it meant. It meant anticipate what your boss needs and ensure that that person's boss is not coming to you about something that you did or something that you messed up. So figure out how can you make your boss look good to their boss, and that will benefit you. And so it continuously goes through my mind in different situations, and I've just found it to be a really helpful piece of advice in the career space.
That's excellent advice. And I think knowing what your boss's boss is expecting is a starting point. 2 positions above what you're applying for, because that's your career path. So what is keeping the boss up at night, and what is the boss's boss worried about? And I also like what you said about UCLA is the best of the best. It's the most applied to country in the nation. And so the competition is fierce. And yet the confidence is a huge boost. And so I think you need to do an 8 clap before you go into any job interview, or before you submit your resume online, or before you go to a networking event, because you deserve that job. You have accomplished huge things by getting a UCLA education. And so the confidence should be there. And so when you apply for a position and they say, why should we hire you? You have to be able to answer them, I'm a perfect fit. You're looking for someone with these skills and this education and this background, and I got that at UCLA, and I deserve to be there, and I deserve to get those jobs. So hopefully we've given parents some good tips, and hopefully we've given whatever students are watching this. I know this is going to be replayed, and I think this is just all around great advice. As we close up, is there any other closing comments you think we need to give our audience out there?
Sure. Well, I know this would seem simple, but one key piece that I always mention to students is making sure that they know that career programming is coming their way from the Alumni Association. When students stop by the James West Alumni Center during orientation, we make sure that they know that alumni emails are coming their way, and don't delete them thinking, I'm not alumni, I'm a student, because there are weekly events designed for them in the career space. And so it's just reminding them that there are important messages coming from us and opportunities, as well as a wealth of information and events that they're invited to. And so it can be confusing at first, because a freshman especially is thinking, why am I getting an email from UCLA alumni? But just assuring them that it's meant for them, it's for students, and to spend some time reading about those events and thinking about what they might be interested in, and to sign up, for whatever piques their interest.
That's great advice, because I usually steal from Stephen Covey, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of his 7 habits is begin with the end in mind. So you are going to be an alumni really quickly. So why not reach out to those alumni and see, how did they get to where they are, and how do they like where they are? It's kind of like the student who I coached, who went to nursing school, and then she got a job as a nurse, and then she came back and she said, uh-oh, all those sick people, I have to wear a uniform. I'm not sure I want to do this. But one afternoon in a hospital, or talking to someone doing what you think you want to do, can really put a light bulb on. And it's also figuring out what you don't want to do. So don't be afraid to put your toe in the water and talk to some alumni and ask them, do you think this is the right fit for me? Will I like it? Do I know about it? And trust me, you want to ask those questions before you get in there. So this has been fantastic. I've really enjoyed interviewing you. I know a lot of times you get to do the interviewing on the other side, but I hope that people will reach out to Liz Moeller on UCLA ONE if they've got further questions. And I hope that they'll show up at some of these alumni events, and I hope that I'll see them there. I'll try to bring my boys. That will be fun. Thank you so much, Angela. That's it for tonight. Take care.